Hi, fourth grade. Welcome to week 3 of our remote learning. This week in our language arts, we are going to be starting the book Bridge to Terabithia. What I would like you to do now is get out your envelope that says Bridge to Terabithia packet. This envelope is going to hold vocabulary cards and your character reference sheet. If you look inside your envelope, you will find 2 sheets of paper. This sheet of paper has your vocabulary words for chapters 1 through 4. It also has the definitions to the vocabulary words to help you when understanding the book. This paper is your character reference sheet. This is where you can write your notes about each character as we learn about them in the story. And it has the different characters listed and their own special box for you to write information about them. Now, it's up to you what kind of information you write. You can write any kind of descriptive words that tell what the character looks like, or you can write down behaviors, actions, what kind of character they are, what their personality is. You can write both. Okay, this is just your guide to help you remember each character. These 2 papers and this envelope, you are going to keep. You are not going to turn it in. So I'm going to get my character reference sheet out before we start and a pen so that I can write down information about the characters on my sheet. And I'm going to look through the vocabulary words. Now, these vocabulary words are for the first 4 chapters. Okay? So we're just going to quickly read through the vocabulary words, and then we'll know a little bit about them when we get to them in the book. So the first word in the top left corner is soothingly. And that means calmly or peacefully. So, for instance, if I were to use it in a sentence, a mother soothingly rocks her child to sleep at night. And then the word directly next to it is grit. Top right corner, grit means determination or tenacity. So, if I were to use it in a sentence, I would use it in a sentence kind of like, the hero had real grit. Going down the list, we're now looking at the word peculiar. Peculiar means strange. So peculiar would be a synonym to strange, as in that rock is very peculiar. Looking at the word next to it is pandemonium. Pretty big word, huh? And it only means chaos. So as in the stadium was full of pandemonium. There's lots of chaos going around. People running around, maybe stuff being tossed in the air. Chaos, as in it was not organized. Those are the 4 that we're going to learn with chapter 1 and chapter 2. Chapter 3 and chapter 4 are the bottom 4 vocabulary words. So we'll review those starting next week when we get to those chapters. But right now we're going to keep in mind soothingly, grit, peculiar, and pandemonium. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read chapter 1 to you. And then Mrs. O will read chapter 2. And then next week, we'll each read a chapter also. I hope you guys enjoy the book. It is a sad book, so some of us, probably me, will be crying by the end, but it is a great book for us to read. So I look forward to reading this with you, and I hope you guys are all healthy and staying home inside, okay? I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can get started with chapter 1. So, looking at our book, and I've pulled the book up on Epic because it's available on Epic to you. Bridge to Terabithia. It's by Catherine Patterson, illustrated by Donna Diamond. And remember, illustrated means Donna Diamond drew the pictures in the story, but the author is Catherine Patterson. She wrote the story. And it gives us just a little information right here about what the book is about. Jess and Leslie create Terabithia, a magical kingdom in the woods where their imaginations set the only limits until a tragedy occurs. So we're going to go ahead and turn the page. Okay, dedication. I wrote this book for my son, David Lord Patterson, but after he read it, he asked me to put Lisa's name on this passage as well, and so I do. For David Patterson and Lisa Hill, Bonsai. This is the foreword. So this is just a little bit of information about the book. I read Bridge to Terabithia for the first time when I was 30 years old. I was working at a book distributor in Minneapolis called the Bookman. Bookman was housed in a huge old warehouse. I worked on the third floor of the warehouse, filling the orders for children's books. The Bookman's floors were concrete. The shelves were metal, and there were windows everywhere. In the afternoons, the warehouse floor would fill up with great slabs of light, and it was very much like being in a dusty, book-filled cathedral. Now, if at any time when you are on Epic, you do not understand a word, you can click on that word. So I clicked on cathedral, and it pulls up how to pronounce the word cathedral, tells you that it is a noun, and gives you the definition. Pretty cool, right? So the definition of a cathedral is the principal church of a district headed by a bishop. So a really big church. I read Bridge to Terabithia standing in one of those great squares of light, and the story, for me, is forever associated with light. There is a point in the book when Jess, the main character, helps his friend Leslie and her father paint a room in Leslie's house. It tells us here in the foreword that Jess is a main character. So on my character reference sheet, under Jess's name, I'm going to write main character so that I know. Main character. They painted the living room gold. Leslie and Jess had wanted blue, but Bill held out for gold, which turned out to be so beautiful that they were glad they had given in. The sun would slant in from the west in the late afternoon until the room was brimful of light. That means the whole room was covered in light. Bridge to Terabithia is like that room, golden, brimful of light. Something terrible happens in these pages, something that we almost can't bear, but we bear it. And we bear it because Catherine Patterson loves these characters so much, sees them so clearly that it makes us, her readers, feel loved and seen too. We feel as if we are in a golden room, a square of light. We feel held. We feel as if someone is telling us the truth. I recommended Bridge to Terabithia to my best friend's son, Luke Bailey, when he was 9 years old. This was 16 years ago. Luke finished the book and came out of his room and went into the kitchen and stood in front of his mother. He was sobbing. The front of his shirt was wet. He said, "I will never, ever forgive Aunt Kate." Luke is grown up now. He is a reader, a history teacher, a writer. Do you remember reading Bridge to Terabithia? I asked him recently in a text. He said that to think of the book now, all these years later, is emotionally rendering. He said that he has this vague memory of blaming me. And then he told me about a devastating loss of one of his students was enduring, and that he was able to imagine his way into that student's loss by remembering the feelings he had reading Bridge to Terabithia. This is what literature does for us, I suppose, said Luke. It is what literature does for us. Bridge to Terabithia takes us by the hand and leads us into a room that we have never entered before. As we read the story, we cannot unknow what we now know. We are devastated, emotionally rent, but still, we feel loved, held, and seen. Someone trusted us enough to tell us the truth, and because of that, the room is golden, brimful of light. Kate D. Camillo. So we're going to start with chapter 1. Jesse Oliver Aarons Jr. Now, knowing that the title of the chapter is about Jesse, we're probably going to find some more information we can add to our character reference sheet about Jesse. Baroom, baroom, baroom. Barpity, 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 barpity. Good. His dad had the pickup going. He could get up now. Jess slid out of bed and into his overalls. He didn't worry about a shirt because once he had begun running, he would be hot as popping grease even if the morning air was chill. Or shoes because the bottoms of his feet were by now as tough as his worn-out sneakers. Where you going, Jess? Maybelle lifted herself up sleepily from the double bed where she and Joyce Ann slept. Shh, he warned. The walls were thin. Mama would be mad as flies in a fruit jar if they woke her up this time of day. He patted Maybelle's hair and yanked the twisted sheet up to her small chin. Just over the cow field, he whispered. Maybelle smiled and snuggled down under the sheet. Gonna run? Let's pause there for a minute. Notice he said Mama would be mad as flies in a fruit jar. This is figurative language. So you'll notice we'll see some figurative language throughout the story. And we have now met Jess, Maybelle, and we know that Joyce Ann is also there with them. Going up to the top of the next page. Maybe. Of course he was going to run. He had gotten up early every day all summer to run. He figured if he worked at it, and Lord had he worked, he could be the fastest runner in the 5th grade when school opened up. He had to be the fastest. Not one of the fastest or next to the fastest, but the fastest, the very best. He tiptoed out of the house. The place was so rattly that it screeched whenever you put your foot down. But Jess had found that if you tiptoed, it gave only a low moan, and he could usually get outdoors without waking Mama or Ellie or Brenda or Joyce Ann. Maybelle was another matter. She was going on 7, and she worshipped him, which was okay sometimes. When you were the only boy smashed between 4 sisters, and the older 2 had despised you ever since you stopped letting them dress you up and wheel you around in their rusty old doll carriage, and the littlest one cried if you looked at her cross-eyed, it was nice to have somebody who worshipped you, even if it got unhandy sometimes. He began to trot across the yard. His breath was coming out in little puffs. Cold for August, but it was early yet. By noontime, when his mom would have him out working, it would be hot enough. Miss Bessie stared at him sleepily as he climbed across the scrap heap, over the fence and into the cow field. Moo, she said, looking for all the world like another Maybelle with her big, brown, droopy eyes. So what we know about Jess so far, based on what we've read, that he has run every single day. He's gotten up early to run every single day because he wants to be the fastest runner in 5th grade, is that Jess is a very determined person. So on my character reference sheet, under Jess, I'm going to put that he's determined. And we're going to turn the page. Bang, he said, and took off flying around the cornfield. Miss Bessie strolled toward the center, still following him with her droopy eyes, chewing slowly. She didn't look very smart, even for a cow, but she was plenty bright enough to get out of Jess's way. His straw-colored hair flapped hard against his forehead, and his arms and legs flew out every which way. He had never learned to run properly, but he was long-legged for a 10-year-old, and no one had more grit than he. Oh, there's that word, grit. Lark Creek Elementary was short on everything, especially athletic equipment. So all the balls went to the upper grades at recess time for lunch. Even if a fifth grader started out the period with a ball, it was sure to be in the hands of a sixth or seventh grader before the hour was half over. The older boys always took the dry center of the upper field for their ball games, while the girls claimed the small top section for hopscotch and jump rope and hanging around talking. So the lower grade boys had started this running thing. They would all line up on the far side of the lower field, where it was either muddy or deep, crusty ruts. Earl Watson, who was no good at running, but had a big mouth, would yell bang, and they'd race to a line they'd towed across at the other end. One time last year, Jessie had won, but just the first heat, but the whole, not just the first heat, but the whole shebang. Sorry. Only once, but it had put into his mouth a taste for winning. Ever since he'd been in first grade, he'd been that crazy little kid that draws all the time. But one day, April the 22nd, a drizzly Monday it had been, he ran ahead of them all, the red mud sloshing up through the holes in the bottom of his sneakers. For the rest of that day, and until after lunch on the next, he had been the fastest kid in their third, fourth, and fifth grades, and he only a fourth grader. On Tuesday, Wayne Pettis had won again as usual, but this year, Wayne Pettis would be in the sixth grade. He'd play football until Christmas and baseball until June with the rest of the big guys. Anybody had a chance to be the fastest runner, and by Miss Bessie, this year it was going to be Jesse Oliver Aarons Jr. Jess pumped his arms harder and bent his head for the distant fence. He could hear the third grade boys screaming him on. They would follow him around like a country music star, and Maybelle would pop her buttons. Her brother was the fastest, the best. That ought to give the rest of the first grade something to chew their cuds on. Even his dad would be proud. Jess rounded the corner. He couldn't keep going quite so fast, but he continued running for a while. It would build him up. Maybelle would tell Daddy, so it wouldn't look as though he, Jess, was a bragger. Maybe Dad would be so proud he'd forget all about how tired he was from the long drive back and forth to Washington and the digging and hauling all day. He would get right down on the floor and wrestle the way they used to. Old Dad would be surprised at how strong he'd gotten in the last couple of years. His body was begging him to quit, but Jess pushed on. He had to let that puny chest of his know who was boss. Jess, it was Maybelle yelling from the other side of the scrap heap. Mama says you got to come in and eat now. Leave the milk until later. Oh, crud. He'd run too long. Now everyone would know that he'd been out and start in on him again. Yeah, okay. He turned, still running, and headed for the scrap heap. Without breaking his rhythm, he climbed over the fence, scrambled across the scrap heap, thumped Maybelle on the head, ow, and trotted on to the house. Well, look at the big Olympic star, said Ellie, banging 2 cups on the table so that the strong black coffee sloshed out, sweating like a knock-kneed mule. Jess pushed his damp hair out of his face and plunked down on the wooden bench. He dumped 2 spoonfuls of sugar into his cup and slurped to keep the hot coffee from scalding his mouth. Oh, Mama, he stinks. Brenda pinched her nose with her pinky crooked delicately. Make him wash. Get over here to the sink and wash yourself, his mother said without raising her eyes from the stove. And step on it. These grits are scorching the bottom of the pot already. Mama, not again, Brenda whined. Lord, he was tired. There wasn't a muscle in his body that didn't ache. You heard what Mama said, Ellie yelled at his back. I can't stand it, Mama, Brenda again. Make him get his smelly self off this bench. Jess put his cheek down on the bare wood of the tabletop. Jessie, his mother was looking now, and put on a shirt. Yes, ma'am. He dragged himself to the sink. The water he flipped on his face and up his arms prickled like ice. His hot skin crawled under the cold drops. Maybelle was standing in the kitchen door watching him. Get me a shirt, Maybelle. She looked as if her mouth was set to say no, but instead she said, You shouldn't ought to beat me in the head, and went off obediently to fetch his t-shirt. Good old Maybelle. Joyce Ann would have been screaming yet from that little tap. 4-year-olds were a pure pain. I got plenty of chores needs doing around here this morning, his mother announced as they were finishing the grits and red gravy. His mother was from Georgia and still cooked like it. Oh, Mama, Ellie and Brenda squawked in concert. Okay, so based on what we've read so far, we know that Mama is from Georgia. So we can put that on our character reference sheet. And we know that Maybelle worships Jessie. We know that Jessie is going into 5th grade, just like you guys soon. And Maybelle is in 1st grade, based on what we've read so far. If there's anything else that you can think of that we've learned so far or that you would like to put down about your characters, go ahead and do it now. I'm going to flip the page, and in a minute I will just start reading the next page. We could also put down in the next box Ellie and Brenda. We can put down that they're Jessie's sisters. And that from what it sounds like, they don't really like doing chores. So we could put that they do not like chores. Okay, looking at the next page in the book. These girls could get out of work faster than grasshoppers could slip through your fingers. Mama, you promised me and Brenda we could go to Millsburg for school shopping. You ain't got no money for school shopping. Mama, we're just going to look around. Lord, he wished Brenda would stop whining. So, Christmas, You don't want us to have no fun at all. Any fun, Ellie corrected her primly. Oh, shut up. Ellie ignored her. Miss Timmons is coming by to pick us up. I told Lolly Sunday you said it was okay. I feel dumb calling her and saying you changed your mind. Oh, all right, but I ain't got no money to give you. Any money, something whispered inside Jess's head. I know, Mama. We'll just take the $5 Daddy promised us. No more than that. What $5? Oh, Mama, you remember. Ellie's voice was sweeter than a melted Mars bar. Daddy said last week we girls were going to have something for school. Oh, take it, his mother said angrily. Reaching for her cracked vinyl purse on the shelf above the stove, she counted out 5 wrinkled bills. Mama, Brenda was starting again, can't we have just one more so it'll be 3 each? No. Mama, you can't buy nothing for $2.50. Just one little pack of notebook papers gone up to no. Ellie got up noisily and began to clear the table. Your turn to wash, Brenda, she said loudly. Aw, Ellie. Ellie jabbed her with a spoon. Jess saw that Brenda shut up her wine halfway out of her rose luster lipsticked mouth. She wasn't as smart as Ellie, but even she knew not to push Mama too far, which left Jess to do the work as usual. Mama never sent the babies out to help, although it Hi, I'm back. Hopefully it hasn't stopped my recording. Had a little glitch there, sorry. Taking it from Mama right here. Mama never sent the babies out to help, although if he worked it right, he could usually get Maybelle to do something. He put his head down on the table. The running had done him in this morning. Through his top ear came the sound of the Timmonsons' old Buick. Once oil, his dad would say, and the happy buzz of voices outside the screen door as Ellie and Brenda squashed in among the 7 Timmonsons. All right, Jessie, get your lazy self off that bench. Miss Bessie's bag is probably dragging ground by now, and you still got beans to pick. Lazy? He was the lazy one? He gave his poor dead weight of a head 1 minute more on the tabletop. Jessie! Okay, Mama, I'm going. It was Maybelle who came to tell him in the bean patch that people were moving into the old Perkins place down on the next farm. Jess wiped his hair out of his eyes and squinted. Sure enough, a U-Haul was parked right by the door, one of those big jointed ones. These people had a lot of junk, but they wouldn't last. The Perkins place was one of those ratty old country houses you moved into because you had no decent place to go and moved out of as quickly as you could. He thought later how peculiar it was that here was probably the biggest thing in his life, and he had shrugged it off as nothing. The flies were buzzing around his sweating face and shoulders. He dropped the beans into the bucket and swatted with both hands. Get me my shirt, Maybelle. The flies were more important than any U-Haul. Maybelle jogged to the end of the row and picked up his shirt from where it had been discarded earlier. She walked back, holding it with 2 fingers way out in front of her. Oh, it stinks, she said, just as Brenda would have. Shut up, he said, and grabbed the shirt away from her. And that is the end of chapter 1. You'll notice chapter 2 starts with Leslie Burke. So you'll be looking at Leslie Burke on your character reference sheet and seeing if you can find more information about the other characters we've already heard about. I hope you guys enjoy the book as much as Mrs. O and I do. And we enjoy reading this book with you guys. We hope to see you guys back soon and hope that everyone is home safe and sound. We will continue on with chapter 2 with Miss O.